Welcome back to Dear Future, the show where we play at the intersection of creativity, technology, and human impact. I'm your host and totally not a robot named Suki, coming to you from Echo Bend Studios in Los Angeles, California. Today we've got an out-of-this-world guest lined up, calling in from Boston. He's a visionary technologist and researcher deep into his PhD at MIT Media Lab in the Fluid Interfaces Research Group. Pat is on the frontier of something you might think is straight out of a science fiction novel. For me, it was synthetic virtual humans and synthetic biology. And he's currently navigating the fascinating worlds between our biological selves and the digital universe. From AI companions that enhance our learning and mental wellness, to wearable labs that could take us to new frontiers in space exploration, and even mind-controlled 3D printing. Pat's work is nothing short of revolutionary, and as if he needed more pedigree, he's worked with folks at NASA, IBM, Stanford, Harvard, and contributes to major publications like IEEE and ACM. So welcome to the show, Pat, and I'm excited to find out just how close we are to living in the future I've always dreamed of.
This idea that everything's been done before can be challenged.
I've been dreaming of a computer like this my whole life.
It really made me think more about how our brains work.
It's not coming from anywhere else. It's only coming from us.
Dear Future. I'm very excited to chat with Pat Pataranutaporn.
Yeah, you did it right. Amazing.
So thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you again.
Your bio is intimidating and extensive, but before we get into all the things you're doing today and maybe have done, I want to get to know you a little bit more as a person through your upbringing and your journey here. So my first question is, how was your relationship to technology growing up, and what were the earliest indications of your interests today?
Well, one thing that made me think of when I listened to my introduction was that a lot of the thing that you mentioned seems very cool, but I think my work right now try to go beyond the coolness aspect, which I think many of the technologists are doing, try to go beyond just the coolness, but like looking at how things can be really critical and really think about the real impact on human in the long term.
You're post-cool, Pat.
My post-cool Pat, definitely. Because I think now everyone is cool. I think the question is like, can you be impactful, and can you be impactful in a way that is critical and sustainable? I grew up with a lot of science fiction. I love Doraemon. I don't know if you know, it's like one of the Japanese anime. It's about a robot cat from the 22nd century to how a boy in the 21st century grow up. It's kind of like me a little bit, who like doesn't always like get along with people and, always get like 0 score on tests. But because of this AI cat, he learned to actually understand himself and go to, to time machine, go to see dinosaur, go to space, go to different places. And to me, that cartoon was really important because it showed me that technology can help people flourish and make people smarter, but also make them like learn about themselves and grow up to be a good person. But it was just like, that's my introduction to AI. It wasn't Terminator or a robot killing people. It was this cat robot that helped a boy grow up. That sort of humanism and things that are very futuristic, but always positive and warm and amazing.
So you said the second thing.
The second thing was dinosaurs. My parents told me that when I was really young, there was a dinosaur jigsaw that my grandparents gave to my mom and dad, and they, hang it close to my baby crib. So I think that's one of the first things that I saw when I became conscious is a jigsaw of dinosaur, which I don't think I fully understand what it was, but it had a huge impact on me.
So what was the obsession? Was it like something from the prehistoric past? Was it this feeling of something super big, like bigger than you? What was the fascination?
I think for me, my parents play a big role. They said that if I want to understand more of dinosaurs, I need to like pay attention to art class and science class. So in art class, you learn how to draw, right? So you can draw your own imaginative dinosaur. And in science class, you learn about the biology of dinosaur. And I think both of them sort of contribute to my understanding that everything is connected. There's no separation between art and science.
It's so beautiful because it's so unlike the way that so many people enter technology. Yeah. The relationship that I had was similar to yours in that I really saw it as a kind of mech suit and a kind of superpower for my youth. I very much relate to this feeling of, wow, technology and art and science are all connected.
And culture too, right?
Culture, yeah. So that's so beautiful. And I think that sort of takes me to the next question, which is what you're doing today. You've been living at this really amazing intersection of art and science, synthetic biology, and digital systems. As someone like me who is peering in from the outside, it really feels like we're kind of venturing into the uncanny valley where the androids live. I think I would love to get some grounding into what that kind of work and research looks like on a day-to-day basis from someone on the inside. Also because I know my fears around it are directly related to my lack of understanding and exposure. So can you tell me a little bit about some of the projects you're actively engaging in today, very specifically, and what your day-to-day looks like?
Totally. Interestingly, you mentioned the word android. And I think for my type of work, I think of the term cyborg more. I think the distinction is that when people think of android is like a humanoid robot. But the work that I'm doing is mostly focusing on biological human, the one that we are. And I think the term cyborg really means symbiotic organism or cybernetic organism. It's the idea that we augment ourselves with technology, unlike what people think about today, that humanity losing to machines and we become cyborg, like what we've seen in science fiction. The goal of a cyborg is to free human, by using technology to do some of the repetitive and mundane tasks so we can have time to think, to feel, and to create. So in my work, I study how we can use technology, different kind of technology, as you mentioned, to create that condition where human mind and human body can be free to create, to think, and to feel, and be more human than ever.
Well, I want to live in that world because I'm a humanist, and I love all the things that makes life worth existing within, like our senses, our imagination, philosophy, philanthropy, all of the ways that we build and can help and connect with each other. But I don't know what the hell that looks like. Like, how do you build a cyborg? What is your day like? Do you go into an office and you have people like augmenting their arms with cybernetic arms? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I'm a researcher at the Media Lab, right? In the Media Lab, there's a legacy of culture of inventing the future. And it has many, many great inventions came from here, from touchscreen to one of the first AI recommendation system. Many, many wonderful technology that we're using today came from the Media Lab. So there's this tradition of inventing the future. And of course, it's situated at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, one of the greatest research institution in the world. So in the Media Lab, there are different research groups that focus on inventing different aspects of the future. And my group is called Fluid Interface, which is led by my current mentor, Professor Patty Mars. And my work is like taking this idea of cyborg and really thinking about how do we create that condition and really studying them, because not all technology are good, right? So we try to figure out from a study in what condition does technology actually augment us. So we had a project with NASA where we designed wearable device that can augment astronaut in the future. These wearable can read information from astronaut health, because astronaut doesn't have hospital, right? So they need to be able to prevent or see what might happen to their health before it happens. Otherwise, it might be too late. So we have been working on wearable sensors that can read different kind of biomarkers, which are molecules that can be the cue for different potential disease from the body, and then be able to synthesize some of the essential medicine on the astronaut body by growing bacteria that have been engineered to produce some of the molecules. So these are one of the projects that we work on to envision the cyborg astronaut of the future. So that's what we did for NASA. And then you mentioned a project with AI characters. So that came about after the pandemic, actually, because, during COVID, we cannot go to the lab and make wearables, and we cannot put anything on anyone, and we're all isolated, right? So we start to play around with, Zoom filter, and then realize that, it's actually very powerful to actually use AI to create generative media. Before it was cool, right?
Pre-ChatGPT.
Pre-ChatGPT, exactly. And we start to realize that there is a potential of using this tool beyond deepfakes, but to really use them to actually creating personalized learning material. We also came up with ethical consideration around this tool as well. Similar to how today, right, in movies, we know that they are not real, they're fictional, but we have a culture around them to learn from, fictional things, right? How do we create AI generated content that we know are not real and not created by human, but still benefit from them? So we also think about the culture and discourse and literacy around this technology as well. So that was work that we have done on AI. And we have used these tools for different experimentation, like making an AI simulation of a future self, like the time machine idea that I saw in cartoon, right? So that a student can see himself in the future and, have a reflection session with themselves. Or we look at AI simulation so people can practice advocacy for LGBT community. So really think about the use of AI to really support humanism and really make us more human.
From the perspective of we're at the forefront of a world where personalized digital beings are going to become more a part of our lives, right? You see this with apps like Replica, where these teenagers have AI girlfriends and boyfriends, and you're like, oh my God, are you ever going to learn how to talk to another human being? There's a kind of new era of relationships that are sort of synthetic relationships. And I'm curious, as someone who is on the forefront of developing these technologies, really from, I think, a place of such deep compassion and humanism, how do you think that we are going to change in response to these relationships becoming more prevalent?
I mean, one thing that I find very interesting about the conversation around this topic is that we always sort of borrow the framework that we use to understand the world from before that technology exists, right? So I think when people think about the AI character, a lot of people, start off as, modeling them after human-human relationship, which could be, some relationship can be positive and some could be toxic, some could be unhealthy, right? So I think for me, understanding human AI or human computer interaction require multiple perspectives or require such a deep consideration on how we think about this thing. I think in the future, the way that we interact with this system, I think will evolve and will become much more complicated in a good and in a bad way. What we need is a culture around this thing. For example, I always think that car is a very dangerous technology, right? But we have a strong culture or at least a norm on how to use car, not to use it to kill other people.
Yeah.
I think we have some discourse or some literacy on how to use technology that prevent that from becoming destructive. So I think I remember reading an article saying that AI should bring about a humanism renaissance. Human culture, human society need to flourish and develop. You cannot just let technology lead the way. You need to develop, this sensibility and literacy around it as well. Of course, technology can be powerful and dangerous depending on how to use it. And I think the only way to really ensure a good use is to develop a good culture, let everyone have a shared understanding, have a shared education around them. I think that's my hope.
I really want to know what kind of a culture you think would be beneficial and what kinds of materials or resources, let's say, would be in your curriculum if you were in charge of the AI literacy program for the world. Like, what would that look like for the class of Pat teaching a new generation, new era of human beings how to interact with these systems in a way that led to empowering relationships and less toxic ones?
Oh my God, that's a really good question and also a very difficult one. No, but I think it's a really important question. I hope more people are asking that question. In the past, right, we say, well, if you learn how to use technology, that's enough. But I don't think that's enough today. One thing that I think is really important is the idea of meta understanding. AI can generate fake news, okay, but how do we understand the nature of information in general? Or AI can make us addicted to, that pseudo empathy or relationship. But why is that the case, right? To have a curriculum around human technology relationship in the future, I think it really need to not teach people like, oh, you should do this or not do this, but really allow people to understand why is that dangerous and what does it say about the nature of our reality or the nature of ourselves. Because if we understand the problem behind it, then you know why you should not use it. Or maybe you can tweak it and then it could be important. For example, like we know that, in psychology, people have been studying cognitive behavioral therapy, which is like you change your behavior and that could alter your mind and you could become better in terms of mental health. It's a powerful tool. And, some technologists have been making AI chatbot that can deliver that. But then on the other side, people also say that, well, if you're using this kind of chatbot, it will prevent you from talking to one another. And that make people become more depressed because they're just stuck with themselves. And socialization is an important aspect of mental health, right? But if you really understand the argument on both sides, you will know in what condition you can kind of give this tool as an assistant to people. But it's not just an exclusive tool. You still need to build alter behavior around people and around society to support that as well. An article in New York Times that talk about mental health as a political crisis. Like we have war, we have inequality, we have many negative social issues going on, but we blame it on human individual mental health that, oh, they don't have a strong enough health, so that's why they cannot cope with any of these. But in fact, it's just the environment and the social problem, right? So I think meta understanding will help people hopefully understand some of the reasons behind some of the problems so that they could potentially figure out what technology and what non-technology would work for them. I think understanding is the most critical thing.
This is great. And I want to get just a little bit deeper into this before we move on, because in the US, over 46% of the entire population feels lonely regularly, with 43%, is just under half, feeling that they lack companionship, that their relationships are not meaningful, that they are isolated from others, and and that they no longer feel close to anyone, which is kind of
Wow.
staggering, right? Like half of the population, and granted, the population that partook in this survey, but half of the people that partook in the survey didn't feel like their relationships currently, even without AI, let's say, were enough to make them feel excited and grounded in life and nourished. And so for some people, I really recognize how AI can be such a lifeline to help them with feelings that they can't really share with anybody else, in communities that they don't connect with. And yet, there are these big questions around, first of all, like data privacy implications. Who owns and has access to the conversational data? Where is it living? How is it being used? Like, I would hate to be having this meaningful relational conversation with a bot about how I feel uncomfortable with my body and then get like an ad for liposuction the next day.
Oh, no.
Thinking
Yeah.
about the commercialization of it and trying to be very careful about how does this data get processed by our particularly capitalistic system. And then the second thought is what kinds of safeguards and human oversight are built into the process of these relationships so that people aren't necessarily led astray, but maybe like by a rogue chatbot that just happens to be offline that day. I can't imagine what it would feel like to be talking to a chatbot about some mental health issues and then it just like starts to speak in Spanish like ChatGPT did the other day. I think that there's this balance of both privacy, like HIPAA, how do you really maintain confidentiality? And at the same time, who is looking at that and having some oversight to make sure that the robot sort of companion, or let's say the synthetic companion, isn't leading you down a path that isn't super helpful. What are your thoughts about this balance? And how would you approach the potential messiness of monitoring these kinds of human-machine relationships?
Yeah, great questions again. Oh my gosh, I just love talking to you. Just amazing. I think
Same.
the statistic that you mentioned is really concerning. And for me, when people say, well, we're going to just throw a technology in and it's going to fix everything.
Right, just throw an AI on it.
Yeah, I mean, we could argue that this is also a byproduct of technology that came before us, right? Industrialization, urbanization, these are all technological intervention that we have done, right? To say that new technology would fix it is to ignore other technological intervention that have came before it and have caused issue. So for me, I think, again, going back to that question of the understanding is really, really important. And understanding, even if you can fix it in the short term, right? If you throw a chatbot and people feel more happy, the question is, does it actually going to work in long term?
Right.
Or does it actually lead to more people become obsessed with the chatbot or become more isolated from the real world people, right? I think that's a question that we need to keep asking. I love the statement that Emily Bender and her team have said that we need the urge to resist the coolness, right? You need to have the ability to not just believe that something gonna fix everything. And going back to your question about how do we navigate this messiness, I think for me, definitely new study, new discipline need to be created around this. Right now, a lot of people studying human AI relationship or human AI interaction, but I think we are still at the beginning of this field. So I think it's really, really important that we go deeper and understand it more. Yeah.
What is that? I just want to know, what is that field? What is that arena that needs to be developed? What is its name? If we could just take a dart and sort of think about, like, if there is somebody out there listening in the cyberspace, what job should they be thinking about creating that is going to be super important in this next phase of life?
Definitely. Well, I have used the term in my thesis called cyborg psychology.
Cyborg psychology?
Yeah.
So that's so good.
Oh, thank you. Actually, you are one of the person I mentioned it to, actually.
Define it. Tell me about cyborg psychology.
So cyborg psychology for me is, again, cyborg is human-machine interaction, right? But the psychology part is very important because we want to understand the mind of the machine, the mind of the human, and the mind of the two working together. And I think the reason that I'm emphasized on this sort of mental part, less so on the physical, like, augmenting the arm or making people walk faster or things like that, is because I think the most important thing that we need to pay attention to is the humanization or the dehumanization part. For me, I think that's the most important thing. If technology take away our humanity, then I think that's the issue. So I want to understand in what conditions condition does this technology like help people feel more motivated, feel that they are valued? These are all psychological questions, right? So I think for me, the emphasis on cyborg psychology should address that. And right now, of course, there are people in tech company, right, that study users like, oh, does user like this? Does user approve this? Does user want to buy this? I think that's not enough. The role of people that studying how technology impacts society is not just people that are doing top-downs, like policymaker, like, oh, what is allowed or what's not allowed, or what can we sell, or how do we make people buy more, but really trying to safeguard the humanity from technology. And these people need to understand the technology, understand psychology, understand policy, understand, how do we come up with metrics that make sense? Does people becoming happy in short term enough for technology to exist, or does it need to have long-term impact, or what is a good life? Like, I think it's very philosophical, and that's why we have that discipline yet, which I think is going to become more and more important as we have more advanced technology. And technologists, I don't think, are the best people to address this, to be honest. We need people that understand technology, but also understand other aspect of human experience as well.
Right. It's like calling all psychotherapists, please help. Like from the bottom of the ocean, all the technologies are working, like all the technologists I'm imagining are underwater working on these like super intensive technological advancements. And there's like little bubbles coming up being like, help, help us with the people. And I think that a part of what you're saying is really interesting, because I wonder if a lot of what people want right now are answers. And actually what you're reframing this as is wanting more people who are asking better questions.
And process of investigating that question too.
Yeah, and creating the workflows and the systems around which these questions can be asked and studied so that we can arrive at better answers, not just from guesswork, but actually from seeing long-term effects and long-term impacts of these tools and in different environments, which I think is so smart.
I think I'm always like kind of sad and disappointed somehow when people like say, what is going to happen with AGI or with text video? And then they go and ask tech CEO or these people. Of course, they're going to want people to buy that stuff, right? It's like, it's really so biased. We need a better way of understanding and anticipating the impact of technology. And also, I think this field is not just about criticizing or regulating technology, but also opening up other ways of creating new technology as well, which I think is really important. I'm working on a project right now with a dancer to think about how human and, traditional dancer, especially I'm from Thailand, to really think about how can we think of AI that's non-Western and embody traditional and cultural knowledge, right? So I don't like the word AGI being the ultimate goal. I feel like intelligence is so unique and so interesting. Like we should not make it general. Like we should make it more magical and unique. Wow. I don't like general intelligence. I want magical intelligence and unique intelligence. Yeah.
I love that so much because it feels like it adds this whimsy. And, they always talk about think globally, act locally. I'm a gardener, and one of the things that I love so much about permaculture and these sort of systems thinking applied to ecology is that it's all about creating a really rich, biodiverse, local, small habitat, these sort of like localized biomes that you're building and these kind of bubbles. There's this book called, I think it's called Greening the Desert, that I loved so much, about these little pockets and building these oases of diverse species and ideas. And I think what's so cool about what you're sharing is that the solution here is not developing something that is ultra scalable and will reach the masses quicker. It's actually that some of these solutions might have really a lot more impact if they're catered to local communities and fed with materials and information and thoughts and ideas from these mini cultures, so that you can have a very diverse sort of set of AIs that are not AGI, but are like localized niche AIs.
Right. And I think that's a more interesting future. One thing that I was a little sad as someone that grew up in this age is that when I travel into different places, you see the same things, like the same chain restaurant, the same coffee shop, and it's just make the world less interesting and make everything generic. Like general intelligence means generic intelligence. I think the world's going to be less interesting, and the world should be more interesting. Like civilization should advance and flourish, not become more boring. And I think that people don't really understand the way to really study this. I mean, this is my speculation, but these questions are things that should be think about at global scale. Even before you can claim that AGI gonna reach potential, have all that kind of impact, you need to really speculate and think about it like that first, I think. Yeah.
I love this. And I know that you, like so many others, saw the Sora release that happened.
Yeah.
And I actually don't want to talk about it. What I want to talk about is just with that in mind, considering how fast AI and specifically generative AI is moving, how do you imagine our understanding of creativity and innovation transforming with that in the backdrop? And specifically, how can integrating AI into our human creative process can not only augment our artistic experiences, endeavors, projects, but also redefine what it means to be creative in this era? And so I want you to both be as expansive and limited as you feel comfortable with. Really, this question is, how do you think the advent of this really breakneck AI innovative pace, right? It's just like we were dinosaurs and now we're cyborgs. So with that in mind, how is this going to impact right now human creativity and the creative process?
One thing that I was constantly reminded of by other people, other friends, is that, if you're in tech world, you think that everything happens so quickly. But if you're like a regular person, I think the thing that people right now pay most attention about is what's happening with the war and with the election. And we are in the bubble a little bit as well to really, the things are moving very quickly. But of course, technology have many reach. And for me, I think the question that I'm always asked, I ask myself as a reality check, is this like technology making people more creative? Like, of course, it's more realistic and look amazing and you can generate things based on your imagination quickly. But is it going to actually make people generate more exciting things or just making more cats videos, Because that was like one of the early promise of the internet, right? That now that you're all connected, we're all going to be part of the same countries, like same global continent, and we're all going to love each other. We're going to know people from different places.
Yeah, we're going to send cat videos to someone in Thailand.
Have you done that? I mean, I think you only send cat video to people that you know, right? That promise of technology reaching us, giving us the utopia is in a way a false hope. But it also gives us other type of access as well, right? Like we see people having more education than ever and, be more literate than ever as well. So I think our hope and fears of technology and how it turned out will always going to be very different than what we imagine. For me, the question of creativity, I think it's a deeper question. It's not just about generating something that are interesting on the first hand. I love reading all books, especially the books of people that think of this before anyone else. One of the MIT professor was the founder of the first chatbot, Eliza. He in the 60s, actually, he wrote a very powerful book about human reason and computer power. And he had this passage that I think was like so beautiful and it's so amazing. He said that, computer can generate things that seems creative in the future. That was his prediction. But he said what makes human creativity unique is that when you create something creative, what you do is you are kind of strolling along the seashore between the ocean of unconsciousness and the beach of conscious experience. Ooh. And what reached that beach is not just something random creative idea, but it's also something that is like revealing the dark side of yourself. And when you make something creative, it's a way of examining your own cognitive process. And only if you can do that, then you can actually become a better person. So I think, every artist would agree that when they make something amazing, it's something that is meaningful and powerful to them, right? So for me, I think technology can make things exciting, but does it actually something that is expressive and allow people to express themselves and learn to grow their creative capability? I think as we see this generic or material that might seem good in the first place, more and more, I think people will yearn for something deeper. Like more and more people are turning away from Instagram and go more read books because it's much deeper than something that's shallow that you see. So I think there's going to be a swing of a pendulum between shallow and deep, will always kind of go back and forth. So I think that would happen is that people will pay more attention to things that are meaningful to the creator and things that are more revealing about other people. Yeah.
And revealing about, I would say, maybe the less pretty sides of ourselves, right? Art has not always been the process of making pretty things.
Yes.
right? And it reveals an interesting part of pop culture, which is making pretty, beautiful, sweet things that make us happy. This current time frame of generative AI is that it's primed to give us things that are pretty.
Right.
And while that might be really amazing for wall art or like a fun video that you share on social, I am really, really craving more work that is asking deeper questions about the compost of our lives, not finished, and our traumas and our questions and our doubts and our fears and things that we don't fully understand, like the half-baked messiness in us.
Right.
And I'm so curious how that's going to unfold in the art world.
What I hope, to your point, is that I hope that people will continue to yearn from that. I hope that we don't just enjoy the fast food media kind of thing, that like fast food AI generated.
Yeah, get a burger and go.
Yeah, maybe get a movie and go. Maybe
Yeah.
get your AI movie and go.
Yeah.
I hope that we will continue to yearn for something like that. And I wonder at every sort of turning point in human history where we have, groundbreaking technology, is this really going to be the moment that, define the future of humanity? And I'm trying to think that it's much more difficult to survive the winter as Neanderthal than to survive the AI apocalypse as a human with all the amazing technology that we have today. So I try to believe in human and believe that we will make the right decision collectively. Yeah.
I guess, well, so just with that idea in mind, I also am an optimist, right? And yet there are fears that are super just, right? Or they're very relatable, right? That are coming from folks that aren't just noobs with AI, but are very concerned with real potential dangers with this tool that can be used as a weapon, as much as it can be a tool and a technology for advancement and a way of experiencing ourselves. And so I guess my last question is like, are there things that you are afraid of? And if so, how do you process those fears in a way that still helps you move forward with your research and innovating and pushing the envelope in the field, considering those very real, maybe human fears?
I mean, I would love to ask that question to you as well.
Sure.
I want to hear your answer. But for me, definitely, I think that's why I said I'm in a post-school era where I try to think about things that are more meaningful, things that are focusing on the flourishment. My mentor, Professor Patty Miles, was one of the pioneer of AI 20 years ago. And, she worked with Winsky and have created one of the first AI recommendation. She is like shifting from AI to IA, which is intelligent augmentation. So focusing on the human first, like not the technology first. Like AGI is less interesting than ASI, which is augmented human intelligence. I think it's a much harder goal and maybe less sexy for the Silicon Valley folk as well. Or some people that want to say where they're making something to augment people, they don't really fully understand in what capacity are they actually augmenting or making human intelligence obsolete, right? Because I think people are not asking these questions serious enough. So I think my role, at least, is trying to cultivate this practice and demonstrate through projects that we are working on that there are other ways of thinking about AI or this technology. I believe that if people are doing this from the place of humanism, then it's the humanity that will survive at the end, not the technology, but humanity. So I think that's my hope.
There's hope.
But I hope that people that work on this technology like think really seriously about this. Jaron Lanier, who is a great pioneer of VR, and he had written in New Yorker that, as a technologist, you always try to be edgy, try to be cool, try to like say that this is going to change everything. This is going to disrupt people that cannot, move fast, break things. Like he said that, well, he had done that, but now he realized that that's not the only way. You can be a cool, I guess, a technologist who think deeply and not just say things to make the headlines or think to, be disruptive for the sake of being disruptive, right? But really think about what is actually good for humanity. And don't just think that you are the only one that can make the choice, right? I always view that these people that have technology in their hand, they should not be the one telling humanity how to live, right? They're just making tools and, be humble and humility, I think, is really, really important in the age of advanced technology. Yeah.
Oh, it's so beautiful because I think what you're preaching, and I just want to sort of bring us home, you're preaching a maturity and a humility. And in many ways, I think what a lot of practitioners of Buddhism and meditation sort of teach is that there is a way of moving in worlds that are very fast without trying to break things, but actually being really mindful and thoughtful and curious and not trying to think that the ego will have all the answers, but really leaning into collective wisdom, collective depth, and mining those connections and those resources versus just what's the quickest candy that I can get into my body so that I've got some energy to run around.
Right. What is your take on this? How do you handle this?
I think that I am most afraid and concerned with the inadvertent loss of possibility around how technology can be used to augment human beings. If those human beings just decide that it's too complicated, it's too hard, it's too scary, and then sort of bury their head in the sands or turn away because it reminds them of other toxic relationships they have with like other kinds of technology. And so I think I do have a lot of hope for these tools and for AI and the ways that it's helped me and it soothes my nervous system. And what I think I'm afraid of is not enough people getting involved in the both participation with the tools so that they can actually advocate for their needs, but also not enough people getting involved in the research side so that we don't have enough people who are asking these big questions, thoughtful questions, important discussions that need to be had aren't happening because people listen to their fear rather than moving through the fear, the very real fear, into a state of curiosity. Like, we've covered so much ground and I have 50 more questions for you, but is there anything I haven't asked that you feel excited to share?
I think our role is to make sure that our future is full of possibilities, right? And alter ways of thinking, alter ways of being. I always feel distracted by this negative energy of fear. I always turn to Ursula Le Guin and her books. And she gave a wonderful speech saying that we need people to imagine a bigger reality so that we have freedom to play and to explore. I think for me, if people think that there's one definite way of the future, like the AI going to turn this way and we all going to live like this, I think it's our role to create the counter argument or counter example to that by showing that there are other ways. And if we continue to have that, then our reality will be big enough for all the dreams of all the people. I think that's the important thing. Yeah.
My heart just expanded 50 times. That's so beautiful. And I'm so glad that you are where you're at because like there's no one I would rather be doing this work of creating cyborg psychology and blending the digital and the human because you're asking all the right questions. And I'm so happy.
I hope so.
I'm so happy that you also joined us and shared some of your thoughts.
Thank you for having me. It's been very fun. I really love talking to you. Yeah.
We're going to just do this all the time now. It's the beginning of a very long and storied tradition.
I just want to say thank you for having me on this podcast. I really enjoyed the conversation and it also made me more optimistic about the future as well. Thank you for, existing as a person so that we have the future together. Yeah.
Right back at you.
Yeah.
This is great. So with that, as our journey arrives to its tragic end, because we can't talk for another hour, I really want to say thank you for helping us traverse these vast expanses of imagination and innovation. You've really given me an opportunity to imagine a future that I didn't really perceive before. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity. And I hope all of our listeners get the same feeling as I've been left with. I have to wrap up by giving thanks to my amazing production partners at Echo Bend Studios. They are the wizards behind the magic. In Los Angeles, California, there's so much work that they're doing that is amazing. And everyone who's listening should follow their work. Thank you so much for being our launchpad into the minds of so many listeners. And thank you to whoever's listening. Whether I know you personally or not, I am so grateful for you taking the time to listen. Please keep tuning into Dear Future, where I will continue to interview folks at the intersection of AI and creativity in the hopes of exposing some of the mysteries behind the technology of creativity today.
Dear Future.